All right, welcome everyone. Let's dive right into today's explainer because we are unpacking what I can only describe as the ultimate corporate true crime mystery. Now, if you've ever worked in an office setting, you already know the deal. The real drama, the stuff that actually matters, it doesn't usually happen with loud arguments in the boardroom or dramatic shouting matches. No, the real danger, the actual toxic office politics, happens incredibly quietly. It happens completely in the margins. We're talking about the files, the hidden metadata, those really subtle workflow changes that no one pays attention to. Today, we are looking at an absolute masterclass in accountability from the Office Drama Stories universe. We're going to be following strategy lead Maya Carter along with her audit team as they face a seriously chilling new test. So here's the setup. The company has supposedly reformed, right? They've gone ahead and established a public memory wall and a memory charter, all designed to protect the truth. But as we all know, old habits die hard, and the deeply ingrained habit of corporate cover-ups, well, it's about to rear its ugly head in the most bizarre way imaginable. We are talking about an official company apology for a mistake that literally had not even happened yet. It's an impossible artifact, a total glitch in the matrix. So let's just get right into it and see exactly how this whole thing unravels.
So let's start with this room shrinking cold open. We really need to explore this impossible artifact that was just sitting there, found in the office before the workday even really began. Picture the scene with me for a second. The office is super quiet. It's got that specific blue-gray morning light going on. People are just getting to their desks. You hear badges swiping in, coffee's being poured, totally normal day. And then, there it is, a public apology draft. Now, at first glance, it looks completely administrative. It looks incredibly small and insignificant. But there is a glaring, massive problem. The timestamp on this apology draft is exactly 4 hours before the reported incident it is supposedly apologizing for. I mean, think about that. How do you write a corrective statement for a crisis that hasn't even occurred yet? For a team who have fought tooth and nail to build a safe record-first culture, this isn't just a minor typo. Oh no. This is a massive, blaring red flag. It's this incredibly ordinary-looking object that suddenly nobody wants to explain, and it immediately tests absolutely everything this company claims to stand for.
I want you to listen to this crucial insight from the source material. The record did not raise its voice. It simply waited for someone patient enough to read it. I absolutely love this concept. It hits the nail right on the head. Maya Carter and her team, they understand a fundamental truth about corporate sabotage. The most dangerous documents, they almost never look dangerous at first glance. They look completely boring. They look exactly like standard operating procedure. Because as IT audit specialist Jordan Price points out, boring is exactly where people hide expensive, really damaging things. If a toxic leader wants to push a false narrative, they don't send some dramatic, threatening email in all caps. Of course not. They quietly adjust a routing note, or they backdate a mundane form. They are totally relying on the fact that most people are just too tired, too busy, or honestly too intimidated to read the fine print. But the beautiful thing is, the truth doesn't actually need to shout. It just sits there. It just needs a patient reader.
Okay, let's move right into section 1, the impossible apology draft.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how strategy lead Maya Carter reacts. She doesn't panic when she sees this draft, not at all. She is just relentlessly focused on making the company remember the truth through really rigid systems. So instead of storming into some executive's office and making a scene, she just looks at the undeniable tension between the timestamp and the actual mistake. Let's break down the timeline here. On one hand, we have the creation time of the document. On the other hand, the reported incident time is sitting there, a full 4 hours later. In any normal universe, right, an incident happens, there's a period of discovery, maybe some panic, and then eventually an apology gets drafted. But here, the entire timeline is completely inverted. This isn't just a tiny inconsistency, it's a physical impossibility. Well, an impossibility unless the incident was entirely anticipated or honestly completely fabricated from the start. Maya knows she needs her team to systematically test the official story without giving into any emotional chaos. This single quiet discrepancy is the loose thread that once they start pulling is going to unravel the entire polished facade of the leadership. So how does leadership respond? Let's check out section 2, the corporate PR excuse. You see, when the system gets caught, it doesn't just confess, it rebrands. Enter Transformation Officer Adrian Vale. Now, Adrian is polished, and he is incredibly dangerous precisely because his efficiency is so often used to just erase the truth. He teams up with an external consultant, Rochelle Harlan, to come up with the official, sanitized explanation. And what do they claim?
They claimed this highly suspicious document was nothing more than a crisis template. Yep, Communications comes out and states it was just a standard PR document, supposedly just copied over from some old folder purely for the sake of business continuity. Sounds perfectly harmless, right? They even project a slide in this fancy glass conference room that literally says, "Fresh start." I mean, you can't make this stuff up. That's the absolute genius of corporate cover-ups. They frame the anomaly as standard procedure. They use all this soft professional jargon as a shield, essentially begging the team to believe this is just harmless alignment, nothing to see here. But Maya and her team, they know better. They know that when a narrative sounds that perfectly sanitized, there is usually a massive mess swept right underneath it.
This brings us to Elise Warren. She's an independent board member who is determined to make sure this real reform actually survives, and she drops this incredible insight. Closure without memory is just a new cover page. Think about how incredibly powerful that phrasing is. The executives, they just want everyone to move on. They keep throwing around the word closure, but Elise recognizes that if you just slap the word resolved on a situation without actually documenting what went wrong and exactly who was responsible, you haven't fixed a single thing. You've just put a shiny new cover page on the exact same toxic book. Maya completely agrees, stating, "Then let us read the page underneath." And then HR manager Linda Park adds the absolute crucial final step to this. "And let us keep the page where everyone can see it." They're completely refusing to let the company just blindly move forward in the dark.
All right, so they refused by the excuse. Let's look at Section 3, reading the digital trail, and see exactly how they proved it. So the executives are up there relying on polished speeches, but Maya's team, they rely purely on data. They understand that every single action leaves a footprint, and they decide to let the company's own servers do the arguing for them. It's brilliant. Let's break down this methodical sequence they used to build an absolutely undeniable case. Step 1, operations coordinator Sofia goes in and checks the fine print, the metadata, all those tiny little footnotes. And you know why? Because she is new. She actually hasn't learned to just skip the boring parts yet, like everyone else has. Step 2, executive assistant Nina pulls the calendar exports, the draft notes, the visitor logs. She knows firsthand that invisible background work still leaves foreground records. And then step 3, IT auditor Jordan extracts the raw access logs. There are no cinematic hacker visuals here, no glowing green code raining down a screen, just the raw, incredibly unedited sequence of who logged into what device and exactly when. Together, these three turn totally ignored everyday administrative data into an inescapable, tightening net. All of this extracted data builds into this beautiful, undeniable visualization, Maya's proof map. Maya doesn't run around chasing people or demanding confessions, she maps the systems. On a clear wall, she meticulously organizes the raw data. Look at the structure she uses. We've got columns for object, owner, timestamp, beneficiary, and missing approval. What she's doing here is creating a perfectly clean path from the action straight to the owner. When you map it out like this, the records begin speaking loudly long before anyone actually confesses to anything. As Maya herself says, we do not need louder opinions. We need a clean path. And this map, it completely, utterly neutralizes the PR spin. Because, you can argue about optics all day long in a boardroom, but you cannot argue with a time-stamped owner field sitting right next to a glaringly missing approval signature. The visual structure of the data just slices right through all that emotional fog. And I have to say, I really love this next point. Jordan emphasizes that finding the truth isn't some kind of magic trick. It is simply a sequence. He says, this is not suspicion, this is sequence. When Adrian Vale tries to push back, because of course he does, suggesting that logs need interpretation, Jordan shuts it down instantly. He just replies, "Yes, that is why I brought the raw export." Boom. The executives are so used to interpreting data to fit whatever narrative they've cooked up. They are used to casting doubt by calling people suspicious or paranoid. But Jordan strips every bit of that away. A sequence is just a timeline of reality. Somebody logged in, somebody changed a field, somebody benefited when the record looked boring. It's entirely 100% objective. And in a corporate culture that's built on subjective optics, a raw sequence is literally the ultimate weapon. Which brings us to the emotional climax of the whole ordeal. Section 4, the room shrinking question. So, we are in the formal review meeting, and the toxic leaders are doing what they do best, playing characters. They are practically begging everyone to think about the optics, and warning the team to be careful not to turn every tiny inconsistency into a massive crisis. The pressure is arriving super softly, completely disguised as friendly career advice. But analyst Aisha Morgan, she completely refuses to play along. She drops this specific, piercing question to stop the room from moving from facts back into feelings. She asks,
Who benefits if this stays classified as harmless? Wow. A single question completely shifts the entire dynamic of the room. The executives wanted to keep everything vague and philosophical. Aisha forces them to look directly at motive. If this is really just a harmless template, why is someone fighting so incredibly hard to keep it hidden? And when Elise Warren backs her up, telling the executives to answer the question, not the mood of the question, all the hiding places just evaporate. Procedure is no longer a shield for the powerful. The fog lifts, and the name of the beneficiary is about to become painfully, undeniably clear.
And here we go. Here is the ultimate reveal, the smoking gun that Maya places right beside that polished official explanation, until both simply cannot stand in the same room together. This wasn't a template at all, not even close. Nina actually found that the draft already named Sofia as confused before Sofia had even submitted her routing note. Just let that sink in for a second. This was a completely pre-written narrative of planned blame, specifically targeting a brand new employee. The communications team, heavily influenced by this deeply toxic need to protect the company's optics above all else, had literally scripted Sofia's failure before she even took an action. They were fully planning to use her as a scapegoat to cover up a systemic error, and they actually wrote the apology for the error, blaming her 4 hours in advance. It is honestly chilling. And it proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that the old culture of just erasing people to protect the company brand was still very, very much alive. As all this evidence just piles up, Maya actually becomes quieter. She completely corners the toxic executives with this absolute masterstroke of a statement. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust the record you created. The executives, they try one last desperate defense. They start suggesting that, well, maybe the record was tampered with, maybe the logs themselves were changed. But Maya is 10 steps ahead of them. She calmly points out that even if a record was changed to hide the truth, that change itself leaves a log. The act of changing it becomes the new evidence. There is absolutely nowhere left for them to pivot. Checkmate. Maya has taken their own corporate systems, their own tedious administrative busywork, and she's turned it into an inescapable mirror, reflecting their exact actions right back at them. So, how do we fix this permanently? Let's look at Section 5, Systems over Speeches. Maya knows that simply winning an argument in a boardroom isn't enough. Exposing one lie, firing one person, it just isn't enough. Because the private fix, like a quiet resignation or a hushed-up settlement, that only serves to make executives feel comfortable while leaving all future employees totally exposed. So instead of relying on a hidden fix, Maya writes visible structural controls directly into the company's workflow. Let's look at these new rules added to the memory charter. First rule, require all corrective statements to cite verified records. You can no longer just issue some vague, sweeping apology. You must link it directly to a time-stamped, fully audited fact. Second rule, strictly ban pre-written employee blame language. Never, ever again can a communications team sit around and draft a scapegoat narrative before an investigation has even begun. Jordan adds that they must make the process itself leave footprints. You see, you don't just rely on brave individuals to fight every single battle. You write the truth into the fundamental rules of the software and the workflow itself. That is how you change a culture. And this brings us to what is probably the most powerful insight of this entire explainer. Maya says, "Do not quietly fix what can publicly teach." That line just perfectly summarizes why a repaired workplace isn't necessarily one without conflict. It's one where conflict must leave an undeniable record. When companies hide their mistakes, they are literally robbing their employees of the opportunity to learn how to navigate failure safely. Maya understands that sweeping this whole apology draft incident under the rug would be a massive disservice to everyone involved. By making the correction public, by carving it into the memory charter, she turns a moment of toxic betrayal into a permanent monument of instruction. It ensures that the very next time someone tries to pre-write a narrative, the system itself will automatically reject it. So as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final room-shrinking question for you to really ponder. Think about your own office dynamics for a minute. In your workplace, who writes the narrative before the facts arrive? Is it the loudest person in the room, the one who's most obsessed with optics and the brand? Or is it the undeniable, boring, quiet digital record? Remember, true accountability isn't about rescuing the truth over and over again like some superhero. Protecting the truth means building systems that ensure the truth no longer needs anyone's permission to appear. It means making sure the record is always waiting patiently for someone willing to read it. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. And hey, keep your eyes open for those boring documents at work. They might just be telling the most important story in your entire office. See you next time.